Listen, what I believe is this, it's simple. If you have the passion for music in your heart, if you really want it, find a way to make it work for you, whatever that is. You know, you might become somebody who's in a band, you might become a famous YouTube drummer, you might become a really good instructor. And if that's what works for you, you know, you win because you do something that you actually love. So I would say just never give up on your passion. You know, if you have any way to make it work, use that way and make it work.
It's awesome, man. So all of you out there watching, please welcome Dirk Verbeuren from Megadeth to Drumeo. So great to have you here, man.
Thank you, man. Thanks. It's a pleasure to be here.
Long overdue, and it's always good to have some good energy in the studio. I love it. And we even got your touring rig here, too, which is always a nice surprise to be able to get that off the road and into the studio. So.
I know, this worked out great, and it's, yeah, thank you for accommodating me and, my very large demands.
I love it. It's perfect. And I don't know if I've ever seen a rack system like this. It's got a mind of its own. I got to watch out on this side.
Yeah, beware. It's watching you.
I know. I got to be careful. Well, to any of you who aren't familiar with Dirk's playing, you joined Megadeth in 2016.
Yep.
And have been playing with them ever since. You're currently on tour with them, and you recorded drums on the newest album, The Sick, The Dying, and The Dead, in September of last year.
Yes.
Awesome.
Yes. Yeah.
So go check that out if you haven't listened to the record already. And if you're familiar with Dirk's earlier playing, you've also played with Soilwork, Devin Townsend, and a bunch of other artists and bands. So
yes. Yeah. It's been a busy life.
How long have you been touring and recording professionally?
Oh God, the real professional level touring, I guess, started probably a few years before I joined Soilwork. So it would be in early 2000s. With my old band Scarf, my French band, where I lived in France at the time. We started doing we did a couple of European runs in 2002, 2003.
Yeah.
And then, of course, when I transitioned into Soilwork, it became a full-time live situation.
Nice. It's awesome. And lastly, before we get into the lesson, we're going to be talking about a bunch of Megadeth drum parts and your approach to playing the drums. We do this kind of thing inside of Drumeo all the time. You can go to drumeo.com/trial to get started with a 7-day trial and see what we're up to over there in the members area. We have a full method that teaches you how to play drums, 5,000 song transcriptions and drumless tracks, and a whole bunch of other good stuff. So if you want to check that out, there's a link right below this video to get started. Do you want to start with another track?
Absolutely, it'll be my pleasure. That's what I'm here for.
Yes, we did a whole bunch of tracks. You were out for just one day while you're here on tour, and we did a whole bunch of Megadeth tunes, some workouts for the Drumeo members, and we got you playing some songs that you probably never otherwise would ever play. So stay tuned for that. But Symphony of Destruction is next, and this is probably one of the biggest Megadeth tunes.
Yeah, it's definitely one that's a staple in the set. It's expected to be played. It's that riff is just iconic. And I think, if you know Megadeth, you know that song. And maybe even if you don't know Megadeth, you might know that song.
It. Awesome, man. Well, let's do it.
Let's do it.
There it is.
All right.
The classic. That was awesome,
Classic.
man. So we're talking a lot about what you're doing with Megadeth, and of course, you're not the first drummer in the band. They've been around a long time.
They have.
And you were talking a lot about what it's like to come into a band like that has a lot of history, and how do you approach filling that chair where there's been so many drummers before you, and you still want to maintain your own creative musical voice, but you've got to honor the parts. So
Right.
what's that like? And some songs that there's some great examples of that.
Yeah, well, actually, this song is a good starting point to talk a little bit about that. It's a song where I think really, if you look at the drum parts in the whole, they serve the song. So it's a very guitar-driven track and lyric-driven track. It's that's probably part of why it's such a big anthemic song for Megadeth. And the drums really kind of play the back seat. They keep the groove, they keep the beat. There's a few essential fills and a few essential accents.
Yeah.
But it's not some drum fest, it's not a spectacular like fills all over the place, It's not like that. It's all about the swing and the groove. And it's funny because like I haven't really spoken to anybody about this, but when I play like a beat with a hat, like with eighth notes, like I tend to play like where the in-between notes are pretty light,
Yeah.
That's kind of how I learned to play a groove. Nick Menza played more like. So I tried to do that and I tried to like learn that over the years because I want the song to sound like, a little bit like how Nick played it. To me, it's important also growing up as a fan of the band to have those little details that are like, yeah, that's how Symphony sounds.
Yeah, for sure. And are those things that the other members in the band, like, would they ever notice the subtleties like that, or more of just the general, like, this sounds right or something sounds off?
No, they're all very educated musicians, and also Dave really knows his stuff like to a T,
Yeah.
So he'll recognize all that stuff. He was super cool with it in the beginning when I first started playing with the band because I didn't have that much time to prepare. So he was like, yeah, some of those details, I know you'll pick them up over time. And
Yeah.
But he did mention at one point, like he said something along the lines of, yeah, how everybody plays the hi-hat, that's kind of a personal thing, so I don't want to push you too much on that. But it kind of set me thinking and listening and being like, I can sound a bit more like those guys, without completely being like not me, you know what I mean? Because I'm always open to learning new things too. And for me to have a groove that's a bit more, I wouldn't call it heavy-handed, but a bit more consistent like on the hat versus how I naturally play it, like that's another way of playing. There's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah. How much freedom do you actually have with some of those parts? Obviously, you're respecting the original drum part, but how far can you actually take it a lot of the time? Is there freedom to do that, or?
Well, let's say I don't throw in random blast beats,
Of course. That's a good thing.
Yeah. No, I think Dave likes it to be the way it is. We have some live arrangements, like that little stop in Symphony. That's something that's not on the record. We do that live in the third verse. But no, in general, he likes it when it's close to how it was envisioned because he puts a lot of thought and effort and the whole band together for every little detail, So for example, like some of these beats, like they're there for a reason.
Yeah.
It's not different for a reason. So now's not the time to go, well, I play it like this, That's kind of how he sees it. And I absolutely agree with him, actually. I love improvisation, and I love improvisational music, jazz. I listen to a lot of jazz. We were talking about that. There's a time and a place for it. I think when it comes to these metal songs, they need to be the way they are. That's how if I was in the crowd, I would want to see it that way. I wouldn't want to see some guy like, bringing in all his like flashy rudiments and stuff like in a song where they're not originally there.
Yeah. One thing you've talked a lot about even just throughout the day is restraint on this gig and how so often it's not about the flashiest drum part, but it's sometimes you have to hold yourself back. And you mentioned how Nick used to do that too in a lot of the parts.
Yeah, you know, if you look at Gar Samuelson, the first drummer in the band, he was very technical, a lot of chops, lots of really, you know, kind of almost an improvisational approach. Like the running gag back in the day, I guess, was that he never played anything the same twice, you know. But then eventually, like, Dave wanted to rein things in a little bit more and be less, like, probably surprised by, like, what was this crazy, you know, 16-bar fill he just threw in. And Nick naturally had a way of playing that was a lot more based on restraint and that was a lot more supportive of the guitars and of the song rather than showing off. There's moments where he does like showy stuff and cool stuff and moments where the drums can shine. It's just not as all over the place.
Yeah.
And so I think for me, that was a learning thing because in my previous gig with Soilwork, you know, I was very busy drumming like 90% of the time. I was like always hitting everything all at once. That's pretty much, you know, I know that's what I wanted to do, I guess. And I still enjoy playing like that too. But Megadeth's not the band for that. Megadeth's a band where it's about the song, you know. And like I said, there are still moments like the next song we're going to play later is a bit more, that's a song I recorded and that has some elements of stuff I would do in Soilwork, so I'll talk about that.
I was going to ask, like, you coming from Soilwork to Megadeth, very different bands altogether. And was that quite a mindset shift where even just in terms of like the simplicity or the restraint with Megadeth versus what you're doing in Soilwork, did that actually take quite a bit of time to get used to being in a totally different setting? Or was that kind of, you understood right away that that's what this gig is, and that's what I need to do?
That's a great question. I think I understood it fairly early on that that's what this is. It took me some time to be enamored with it.
Yeah.
Like I used to have this thing in the beginning where a song like Symphony, for example, as much as it's a great song, you know, my mindset was a little bit along the lines of like, there's really not much happening on drums, you know. And yeah, the song is going to be in the set list like every night. So, you know, but then I was like, you know what, like there's a lot I can do. Like I can put energy into it. Like what, you know, hopefully I brought a little bit of that today playing the song, like just a presence and a performance, because that's, especially when you play these big stages that we usually play with Megadeth, that becomes a lot more important. As a matter of fact, you know, a lot of little drum details, like, forget about it on big stages because you're never going to hear them, like little cymbal things and stuff. You know, a lot of that stuff just gets lost because big stages and big venues are not built for that kind of stuff whatsoever, even with a really great sound guy, you know. So it's actually sometimes a good thing to have a little bit simplified parts and to bring people a performance, a show, something that they can feel, you know, something they can vibe to, rather than being like, hey, look at all the, you know, all the rudiments I know. So so there's, you know, so my mindset evolved in the first, you know, probably year or so that I was a Megadeth to like really try and appreciate that more. And now I really love it, actually. I think probably my playing now, like if I were to re-record any Soilwork song, I would probably do it a bit more simple and a bit more thought out and maybe less crazy shit all over the place. Sorry to disappoint anyone. It's just, you know, you grow as a musician and you pick up new things all the time. You know?
And I think every drummer, regardless of what skill level you're at, if you've been playing for like a year or 20, 30 years, I think we all go through those phases where we're into one thing a lot and then we transition into something else. And sounds like that was just one of those transition phases. Yeah, it just happened. I think it's a healthy state of mind to keep learning, to keep, you know, opening your mind to things that maybe you thought about a certain way, and then you realize, well, you know, maybe it's not all that bad, or maybe this way I hadn't thought about. So, you know, keep an open mind. That's a general motto of mine. Yeah. Did the same go for, you were talking about showmanship earlier. Was that something that you had to get used to compared to some previous bands? Is that something Dave asked for when you got the gig, or? He didn't really ask for it. It was kind of like I self-imposed that because I was like, well, you know, if on these stages I don't do it, then I'll never do it. And I had kind of started in my last 2 years when I was in Soilwork to bring a few elements, but there just wasn't much room for it because a lot of the songs were just so drum intensive that like there's no time to. Yeah, exactly. We like, you know, it wouldn't have much effect. So now I was like, okay, these songs, there's room for it. And then I was like, of course, watching old videos of Nick and stuff, who was a great showman, you know, had amazing stage presence, had this like just energy where he was just in your face. And I was like, that's what I want to bring, you know, a little bit of that. So so I started, you know, just bringing in things here and there. Some things I copied from Nick, like the cross crashes, you know, some places where he lifts his arms, I do the same. And then other spots where I was just like, oh, I could do something here, or I could stand up, or like Dave would tell me, hey, in this part, you know, Nick used to do this or whatever, you know. So I just built it from there, and it keeps growing, like it keeps evolving. And, you know, I don't do
I don't do this stuff yet because I'm really terrible at it, but maybe one day.
One day. Oh, I love it. One thing I also wanted to talk about, you're like an unreal double bass player, and you have some really cool, like a technical approach to playing double kick. So you want to maybe break down the way you play double kick?
Absolutely, yeah, we can do that. Well, there's basically like, I have the Dynasyncs now, the Tama Dynasync pedals, which are fairly new, a few years old, and it's the first time I played direct drive pedals, so that's a bit of an influence. But the thing is, many years ago when I was still playing, I think the Iron Cobra, I noticed somebody pointed out to me, why is your like ankle like, going from left to right? I didn't know what it was called. I didn't know what it was. I didn't even know I was doing it, because I was so focused on my playing in general. So I was like, oh, that's cool. And then, the swivel, right? And so my right foot wasn't doing that at all. With my right foot, I was just struggling. So at some point, some years later, I set out to I got to teach my right foot to be as good at this as my left. Yeah. And so it took me it took me a while, man. It took me probably close to a decade of, not continuous practicing because I for a lot of years, I didn't have much time to practice because I was always working. But when I did have time, I would work on that. And recent years, it's been a bit more frequent and stuff because I've had a bit more time to do it. And so now it's like, both feet can do it. And what it does is that it's one of those techniques where you can just really get, with the right pedals, you can get a lot out of the pedals without much work at all. Yeah. That's kind of the key because I was really gassing out on fast double kick parts in the past. Yeah. And I was hoping that by putting them in songs, I would do that with my old band Scarf, let's put some really fast double kick parts and then I'll just get better at it over time. But I kind of plateaued, I came to a point where it just felt really uncomfortable and my right leg felt tense. And so the swivel was kind of the key for me. And what it is to break it down, really, it only starts really to be effective at a certain tempo, maybe, for some people it's gonna be 160, 180, could be 200, whatever. But what it is the initial idea is to kind of, as if you were bouncing a basketball close to the ground, you just give it a little impulse and then the ball goes down, hits the ground, and then you give it a little impulse again. And it's almost like that. Of course, my foot doesn't, entirely go off the pedal like that, like you would with a ball, your hand wouldn't stay on the ball. So the foot kind of touches the pedal, but the impulse is very fast. And then when you do that, kind of naturally after a while of practicing doing this, you realize that when you're with that ankle motion, it's easy to go faster, actually. It kind of adds almost a balance thing to it, Yeah. And so then I had to teach my right foot to do that, which was extremely difficult and sometimes really frustrating. So for anybody watching this, when you're trying to learn a new technique like that, especially a pedal technique, it can be really hard. It can be really frustrating. You can sometimes feel like, man, I've been working on this for 2 years and I feel like I've made no progress. I remember telling my wife this at one point, why is this not getting better yet?
Not working.
Just keep at it. Just keep working, because eventually all of a sudden it's going to be click, oh my God, it's getting easier. So, that was kind of what I did. And I still work on it all the time. Nowadays, I always used to play blast beats with, right, left, because when I grew up, back in the late 80s, early 90s, when I started drumming, there were no videos. So I thought that's how they were played. And then one day I actually did an interview with Pete Sandoval for Morbid Angel for some drum magazine. And he's like, yeah, come take some pictures of me during the show. Come behind the kit. Super cool. And then I realized, man, he's playing everything with one foot. What the hell? I was dying inside, I was so impressed. And I was like, wow, that's how it's done. Okay. Yeah. And so now I'm kind of, long story short, now I'm kind of practicing the 1 foot blast myself. But a lot also as an exercise. Obviously, there's no blasting really in Megadeth. So, but I still, for whatever session work, or sometimes when I play some of my older songs, I'll use it. But I do a lot of those kinds of exercises, where I just really just practice the stamina and the continuity. And the key is you don't get worn out by this. It's really easy to just, I can be talking to you, it takes no effort to left foot is faster, but it takes no effort whatsoever. It's very little effort to go So, continuous practice, that's always the key with all this kind of stuff, just find a way to have a really good economy of motion. Same goes for when you're blasting with the hands. If you're gonna, if you're gonna put in too much energy, it's not gonna. Just just want to find a way where it's very easy, you know.
Yeah. Can you maybe show us even just accelerating from maybe like a medium tempo to faster, and so we can all see how your feet kind of adjust as the tempo changes?
Yeah, let me try.
Yeah.
So I'll start at like, actually a good way to show it is going like from 8ths to 16ths or 16ths
sure.
to 30 seconds, depending on how you, that's actually one of my favorite exercises. Just do like a bar or two in 8ths and then a bar in 16 or a bar or two in 16ths, you know, and like. Sloppy, but yeah, that's the idea.
That's awesome.
So, yeah. And so it's really just something that's a continuous work in progress, even for me. Like now, you know, it's something that I constantly keep working on. But that's the key. Again, you know, I think with those things, especially with technique, it's like a continuous job. You never stop.
Yeah. If you're watching this in the Drumeo archives or on YouTube after, go back to this part and slow it down to like 50%, and then you'll be able to watch his foot move. That's crazy, man. And we got some Drumeo students asking, are you running the Dynasyncs just stock, or do you adjust anything?
So there's this cam angle thing at the top of the pedal. I don't know if you know, if the cameras can see this thing here. Can you see this? Yeah, there you go. So this thing, you can simply adjust it. If it's all the way forward, it's gonna feel a lot like a chain pedal, like kind of, especially if you come off a Speed Cobra, it's gonna feel very familiar to that, very similar. And then the more you move it back, just the cam angle, so that it starts feeling more like a direct drive pedal. So what I did was I just started all the way Speed Cobra setting, I call it, and then just progressively moved backward over the course of a couple of weeks or months, you know, and just kind of familiarized myself. Because in the beginning, like, when you're used to playing chain and you go to direct drive, it can feel kind of light, you know, it can feel kind of like there's nothing there. But with this pedal, actually, that's not the case. So I still feel like I have a really good, you know, I still feel like it's really like powerful and heavy, like for heavy hitting stuff. But then it also has the speed and the ease of like when you're trying to do like that kind of stuff. So. So it's a really good, you know, it's a great pedal for that, for sure. The first one that's really convinced me to like, okay, I got to use this.
Yeah, nice. I remember when I think it was RVP, he was telling me about you. He's like, you got to check out Dirk's playing. And I remember going on YouTube, and I remember seeing this video of you from years ago called the Dirk Blast.
Oh, yeah.
And I want to know what the Dirk Blast actually is, because that sounds awesome.
Yeah. So one of my teachers back in school, so this would be in music school, this would be back in 93, probably 94. I asked him, like, how do I apply rudiments to a kit? You know, because like, okay, so in this case, the flam accent, which is basically a triplet with flam that switches hands. So it's like if I play it on two different elements, just so you can hear the basic element, it's. That's the flam accent, so. So I was like, okay, I know how to do this on a snare, but now what do I do with it? You know, this feels kind of like, okay, it's this thing, so what do I do? I play a song. I feel kind of stupid. So he's like, no, just play it all over the kit. Just experiment with it. So I was like, trying stuff, you know, just whatever came through my head. Doesn't all have to sound good. It's just like kind of familiarize yourself with it. And so at one point I did like, oh wow, that sounds like a blast beat. All I have to do is like, there you go.
That's awesome. The flam
so it's really
accent
just
blast.
an application of the flam accent, you know. And obviously, like if you really want to play it tight, it's not actually a flam anymore. So you're gonna do unison, but it's the same sticking. So it's like. And so there's always a space for you. There's like it's like. One hand is doing, and then the other hand does the exact same thing, but the opposite. There's always room for you to make that switch. You know, there's an open note where you can go to the hat. So that makes it really easy.
Nice.
And it saved my life so many times. Like, for example, when I recorded, when Devin Townsend called me up to do some songs on the Deconstruction album.
Yeah.
And he had like these crazy parts that were just like, I don't know the speed, you know, like some insane BPM, way beyond anything I could dream to play for that long. Like in a regular blast beat, I was like, oh, cool, Dirk Blast, like no problem, you know. And he was blown away that I actually was able to play his demos.
Yeah.
So it's a good, you know, it's a good exercise. It's a good, like, just a different way to approach blasts, you know.
Yeah. I love that.
Yeah.
Very practical.
Yeah, exactly. And again, you know, it saved my ass quite a few times, I have to say. So, and I love using it. I use it a little bit on a few new Megadeth songs. Actually, the ones we're gonna play both have
nice.
little segments with Dirk Blast in them. So that's cool.
That was gonna be my next question. Where have you actually used this on, or do you actually use this on the current gig?
Yeah, I do.
That's cool.
At some point, it became like a secret joke to like put one everywhere. You know, like anything I did, there had to be a little one. Sometimes just to feel like.
Spot the Dirk Blast.
Exactly, yeah.
It's like hide and seek in a Megadeth gig.
Exactly.
I love that, man.
Yeah.
You want to do another track?
Let's do it, yeah. So
Cool.
I think we'll do one from the new record, from The Sick, the Dying, and the Dead. And
Yeah.
So like we were saying, this song, Soldier On, that's a song that's, I mean, it's still very much a Megadeth song, but it's a triplet feel. And Dave gave me actually a lot of freedom during the songwriting and recording sessions to add my own things. And this one I feel has some stuff that, you know, is very me, stuff that I would have done in any of my previous bands. So it's
nice.
It's cool. Yeah, I like it.
Awesome. This is Soldier On. Nice. I spotted a few Dirk Blasts in there.
Exactly.
I love it.
That's one of those instances,
It's smooth though. Like, I don't know, man. Especially in like a triplet feel like that, it's just so natural.
Yeah, I mean, it fits right in. Yeah.
Love it.
Yeah.
One of the things I was like really surprised about was you were talking earlier that you grew up listening to a lot of hip hop music.
Yes.
And
yes.
I think it's always cool to look back on like a drummer's influences and where they end up, because you're probably on the furthest end from the hip hop spectrum.
Probably, yeah.
But it's cool how you end up there. And I guess I want to know, like, are there certain things that you apply on this gig or maybe even previous gigs that you pulled influence from hip hop music or any of the stuff you listened to when you were younger?
I think all the time, I still listen a lot to that kind of stuff, and especially those older records. Some of the current stuff is really cool too, but stuff like, early Beastie Boys, Public Enemy, Beastie Boys, actually, all their records. Run DMC and all that stuff, LL Cool J, NWA. Beats were so important and they were so cool, right?
Yeah.
Even though a lot of them were like sampled or programmed or whatever, they were just like, that's pretty much what you got was like beats and vocals and a few sounds, And of course, there's Kerry King on No Sleep Till Brooklyn, which is a nice connection, Actually, first time I heard Kerry King was in Beastie Boys,
Oh, crazy.
So
nice.
But I didn't hear Slayer until like the next year or something. But like, that's the thing. It's all about beats, and I really started tapping and following rhythm, a lot in hip hop. Before that, I was, I listened to all kinds of stuff growing up. My parents always had music around, and they always encouraged me to listen. And my dad would put on records for me. They listened to a lot of pop, rock and roll, tons of classical music. I played violin, was my first instrument. So,
nice.
So yeah, but hip hop really just kind of hit me. It was like the first like teenage rebellion. Like I was like 11. I was like, yeah, this is my.
That's awesome.
And so it's always stuck with me, and I still think that some of the coolest grooves are in hip hop, and so I still reference that in my mind all the time. Like if you need a really nice heavy pocket groove, like
it all stems back to those early years.
For me, and Prince too. Prince was huge for me growing up. I think I got Purple Rain like when it came out. I was like 9 at the time, and that was like my first vinyl I bought, like with my own money. My dad was like, "Here's money to buy it," and so Prince has always been a huge influence, and obviously like amazing beats in there too, all over the place. So, yeah,
that's awesome. You were talking earlier too about. I found this fascinating. Your history with live performance, and you were talking earlier about how you used to get so stressed out about playing live. I think this is something a lot of drummers out there can relate to, whether you're joining your first band or thinking about playing live for the first time, or like yourself, you've been doing it for so long.
Right.
Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, it was terrifying. I remember the first live gigs, I was just like, like, oh no, people are watching me, like, what the hell? It would even be like we'd be rehearsing and there'd be a few friends come in and I'd get all like tensed up, and like, oh, now I got to perform. Oh no, and then you lose like 50% of your capabilities right there because you're not in that safe zone anymore if it's just me and the band guys who know me, So that took me quite a long time to get over, as I was telling you earlier. At one point, I started touring more, and I was like realizing that I really didn't enjoy myself, and I hated like being on stage, and I played like crap a lot of times, I felt like, and so I was like, I got to do something about this. So it became like a mental mind shift progressively, where I started being like, this is going to be part of my job. There's no being a drummer these days if you're not going to tour, or, maybe some rare instances, but for the most part, you got to go out and perform.
Yeah.
So I have to embrace this. I have to start like finding some way to like this. And it took me a while, to become more how I am now. It wasn't like a quick shift for sure, but I think the biggest thing was really just to realize that like, you're entertaining people. It's a show. It's not a technical show off. Yeah, parts of it might be technical. That's one thing, but that's not why most people come and see a gig. Most people don't even know like what a snare drum is, So it's not about that. So I kind of got myself into a very different place over time, where I'm just like, now I go on stage and I have a good time every night regardless. It doesn't even matter. I mean, granted, we have great conditions with Megadeth like 99.9% of the time, so it's would be hard not to enjoy yourself. But still, it's now I go, I give 100% of what I can that night, and that's enough for me. Some nights it's really good. Sometimes I'm like, I could have done a lot of stuff better, but I don't beat myself up over it for 3 hours afterwards. I go like, okay, tomorrow I'm gonna do better. End of story. Forget about it. Move on. You know.
Yeah.
And so that way I enjoy myself a lot more, and I can really focus on just the interaction with the crowd and with the band, and just have a good time.
Yeah. That's some great advice. Take note of that one. Nice. Let's get to some questions. These are from some Drumeo students. This one's from Killer Beats. They ask, why do you choose the Dark Minel set? Is it particularly good for metal? He says it's cool to see a pro drummer with access to any using a set of relatively affordable cymbals.
Absolutely. I used to play the MB20, which are now, have been rebranded Bison's Brilliant. So I still have some of those. My ride, my main hat, one of my Chinas are still basically the series I used to use. But when MB20 got basically terminated, I was like, yo, some of these, they're not going to make anymore, some of these sizes, so I have to try something different. And I had them send me these. And both me and my tech and my sound engineer were all like, man, these are great because they have a little bit less sustain, but they still have a really good punch, really good, they cut through nicely, but they don't overpower as much as the MB20s do.
Yeah.
So it actually was like an improvement as far as what we're trying to achieve sound-wise with Megadeth. So for me, it was perfect, and they're absolutely great cymbals. They last forever, like all Minels, and, can't complain. Yeah, they're killer, man.
Nice. This one is from Susan T. They ask, what is the perfect practice routine for you? What do you practice or work on?
Great question, Susan. I mean, my practice routine is always changing. I'm always doing new things based on what I'm trying to study or what I feel like. It's never a very continuous thing. These past few months, it's been a lot of coordination between hands and feet, a lot of like 1 foot blast, like like that, where I read text on this hand, and then the right foot and the left hand are just basically blasting, and then I go the opposite way. I do right hand on the snare, left foot in between, then I read here. So that's just been kind of what I've been having fun with recently, but it really changes all the time. I think one of the things about learning an instrument, if you really want to progress as a player, you constantly got to look for new things, and you constantly got to open your mind to like, what am I feeling? What am I wanting to do? I don't want to get stuck in like one routine and like that's it. I used to do that. I used to be like, this is all I do, and then after a while it becomes a bit redundant.
Yeah.
So you have to keep pushing yourself. And for me, with all this work on the right foot, I've been trying to find cool exercises to bring that in. And then I noticed that doing all this stuff really improved my playing with Megadeth, even though there's no beats like this in Megadeth, but it was just the coordination really just grew, and I was able to be more precise playing the stuff. So.
Probably gives you a lot of headroom too.
Yeah.
You're not always playing at your max.
That's another really interesting point, is like, if you want to be able to play here, you got to practice there so that you can play here.
Love it. This one's from YouTube. This is from Matthew Facette. Does Megadeth play with a click live?
Matthew, yes, we play with a click live. We have videos for every song, and all that is synced up with MIDI, so Dave and Kiko and James have a click. I have a slightly different click because I have my own sound and stuff and my own count-ins. But we all play with a click, and it's been that way since I've been in the band. They used to not play with a click some years before. So it started, I think, a few years before I came into the fold. But it's tricky. It's great because it's always very solid and it doesn't change from night to night. The tricky part is to be able to, make a click swing. So that's still something I'm learning about, that little bit ahead and a little bit behind thing that creates the pocket or not. It can be tricky. So I love it. A lot of studio recordings are done with click too. And so I've been working with it for many years, and it's just a constant battle to get better at it.
Nice. Let's see, one more from J Nitty Paradiddy. How's your feel with gloves and stick tape? Because you're using both.
Yeah, I know. I'm like that guy that's like super overprotective.
Super glued to Dirk's hand.
Yeah, the sticks don't go anywhere. No,
Yeah.
I mean, it started like this. I used to play without any of this stuff. And then one day, literally, we were in Germany with Soilwork and my hands were so destroyed that I couldn't hold my sticks. And we had to like literally cancel the show that night. I couldn't play. Like we were trying to sound check and I'm like, guys, like I can't even hold my sticks. It's so painful. Like,
Yeah.
so we had the opening band do a headlining set and then we went on stage and signed people's shit. And I was like, this is horrible. You know, I don't want
Brutal.
to do this ever again. So that's when I started playing with gloves. So now I have gloves. What you don't see is I also have some Band-Aids underneath there in key spots. So like where the stick is, you know, like here basically it's like Band-Aids that I always put on. Here too for the snare hit.
Yeah.
And then after a while, I started also adding the grip tape just because I'm like, why am I having so much trouble, you know, sticks flying all the time? Like, just do something about it. It works for me, you know. The feel, of course, took a little bit of getting used to. The first time you play with gloves, if you've never played with them, it's going to feel like really shitty. So it took me a bit, you know, it took some persistence, but I had a good reason to because I didn't want to cancel any more Soilwork gigs.
That's a good reason right there.
Yeah.
Do you have any other final words or pieces of advice for all the drummers watching?
Final words. Yeah. Well, first of all, thank you, Brandon. Thank you, everybody here at Drumeo.
Our
It's
pleasure,
been
man.
absolutely amazing being here. It's been such a pleasure. Thank you for everybody joining us today on the live stream and for watching and for your comments, etc.
Of course.
I mean, you know, piece of advice, like, listen, what I believe is this. It's simple. If you have the passion for music in your heart, you will find a way to get there. Everybody's path is kind of different, so it's hard to tell people like you got to do this or you don't do that. You know, I mean, sure, you can say that, but you know, I'm sure you've heard this kind of advice a million times. I believe that, like, for me, persistence. It's actually the 3 Ps, you know, persistence, patience, perseverance. Those have worked out for me. There's been quite a few times in my career where I was close to like maybe I should do something else, you know, because things weren't working out. That's happened several times. I'm really glad I stuck it through because I wouldn't be here today. So, you know, the key is like if you really want it, find a way to make it work for you, whatever that is. You know, you might become somebody who's in a band. You might become a famous YouTube drummer. You might become a really good instructor. You might, I don't know, you know, whatever it's going to be. You might be working at Drumeo and being in music that way. And if that's what works for you, you know, you win because you do something that you actually love. So I would say just never give up on your passion. You know, if you have any way to make it work, use that way and make it work.
Great advice, man. And again, thank you so much for coming out. There's going to be lots of stuff on the way coming from Dirk. It's going to be really good. So stay tuned for all that. And stoked to hear this last track. This is We'll Be Back by Megadeth.
Yeah, so this is the first single off of the new album, The Dying and the Dead. It's a scorcher. I'm really happy that you know, we brought back some of this old school speed metal, thrash metal energy into the band, and that this was chosen as the first single was like the cherry on the cake. So yeah, let's thrash.
Here it is.